Welcome back to Rise and Thrive Conversations for Greatness. I'm your host, John Merkus. If you caught part one of my conversation with Jodi Herman, you'll already know she's a powerhouse of resilience, ambition, and lifelong learning. We heard how she carved out a career in the global telecommunications industry, took bold leaps into other industries, and built a thriving business from the ground up. Now, in part two, Jodi shares the mentors that shaped her path, the biggest lessons she's learned about leadership, and how she went from working for a company to owning the very business that hired her once. We also speak about the power of genuine relationships, the art of follow up, and why giving without expecting anything in return is one of the smartest moves she's ever made. This episode is packed with wisdom, real world strategies, and the kind of inspiration that will have you rethinking how you show up in your own career and own life. In a good way, of course. So let's get right into it. Part two of my conversation with Jodi Herman. I'll see you on the other side. You're big on building relationships, right? I can hear that. And
Yeah.
so that's personal and professional. And that's not always easy for people. So I'm wondering what advice you might give to people that are listening, thinking, look, I know it's great to build those kind of relationships and to network and whatnot, but I just struggle in that area. What would you say to them?
I think you don't have to be what people expect you to be. I think just showing up and being a part of things, you don't even really have to contribute a lot. Because believe it or not, when I was younger, I was very, very quiet as an individual. The one thing that did happen to me when I was younger in my early 20s is my sister-in-law invited me to Toastmasters, and that's the first time I started to come out of my shell. Because I'd be an observer when I went to parties or outings with people, even my friends as teenagers. I would always be the observer. I was never the extroverted person in the room or anything like that. Finding something that interests you and helps you observe to get out of your shell is usually, even if it's a small group of people that you need to learn to communicate with, or it's a passion where you like to paint, or even if it's arts and craft, whatever it is, it's getting you involved with people who have similar interests, and it's not a lot of conversation. It's just repetitiveness at the end of the day. And to me, one of the most valuable things that you can do with people is to follow up.
Yep.
It's not a very common trait in people,
Yep.
but it's something that I do in my business as a very conscious effort. Is number one, being sincere, because business is business. We all want to make money, but being sincere about it, um, that's a different value system, because some people want to make money and they don't really count the costs. And I think there's consequences for everything in your life, regardless of your decision. There's a good consequence or there's a bad consequence. I always believe in karma, and I don't never want a client to be unhappy with me. They may not like something that's out of my control. We can all disagree, but they're not going to not like me as an individual for doing my
Yep.
job.
Yep.
So follow up is the key. If you want to build solid relationships, always follow up and be sincere about it. Don't be just blasé, like I have to do this follow up. Be sincere. Understand a quality that you remember out of a conversation and
Mm.
bring it to the forefront in your follow
Yep.
ups.
I love that. So what I'm hearing in there is show up. So I think you said that at the beginning. Go to
Hmm.
things, show up, and don't put too much pressure on yourself to be like, oh, this is a networking event, so I better, be bubbly and
You have to talk.
spark
No.
conversations and have to do all that. Yeah, yeah, but I'll just try and be myself and as simple as being an observer, if that's the space or the vibe that you are in at the time. And you never know what can happen when you put yourself in there because the more people that you talk to, well, the more, what am I trying to say here? When you put yourself in those positions where there's people around, you just never know what's going to happen, what you might learn or who you might meet.
Speaking of learning, one of the
Yes.
big things that I've learnt when I've been in this space, in especially whether it's telecommunications or it's been in software, the software business, software applications, is that there are always people in companies that need to learn something, okay, to keep their job or to help a company achieve a different level or results or whatever it is, right? So you find out what the purpose of what you're doing in your job. How does it benefit the client? Understand that, right? If you're doing a job, this is the best way to do it, and this is the way I'm a conceptual person. I'm not a highly technical person. If I look at a company and say, if I'm doing telecommunications or I'm doing software, what is the benefit of what I'm doing to a company? So what can I give back that really doesn't take a lot of effort in order to expand that knowledge? Because to me, knowledge is power in a lot of extent, to a greater extent, because people respect knowledge if they hear it repetitively from the people who bring it to the forefront, and they're happy to do so. Like yourself doing your podcast, you've got the knowledge, you've got the experience, you've got your topics that thrive, and people are attracted to that. So that power is what people resonate with, and they want to be a part of it. So I think that when you have, if I'm selling business applications, which is what I do today, I've always thrown these user group events for free. I said anybody can come in the business community. I'm going to teach you something today. It's not going to
Mm,
cost you a cent.
yeah,
And I used to throw this for 10 years, every once a month. I did it for 10 years. And this is how I still have a lot of my clients today. Because they're like,
fantastic.
it was so good that you offered that to us when my company wouldn't pay to train me to do my job.
Mm, yeah, yeah,
You know, and if you're in a position to offer something like that,
yeah,
it's a very powerful tool.
yep, yep. Transferring that knowledge that you think people might need, and what a great way to also build relationships and have that long-lasting connection when you've really helped people with what they needed. So that's a awesome mindset of contribution.
Yeah. And it is pure contribution because I'm not asking people for their business while I'm
Yeah,
doing it. Because I'm like, it doesn't matter if you're part of another partner or somebody else is taking care of you or you're not my client.
yeah,
I'm here to give you some substance if you're
yeah,
interested. And it was always a great turnout. Really, really
yeah.
good.
The power of gathering people in a particular event, I think, is very underestimated. I know these days a lot of it is probably virtual, but I love those in-person live events. I don't know if it's just because I'm old school or not, and I'll do virtual events as well, probably like you need to do. But I love those in-person events. I know there's something about it. It's just the energy about it.
Yeah, they are fun. I never used to be the person that liked to do that. Like, I will not get up and do ad hoc stuff like you do, but if I'm training somebody, I could do that all day long. Not a problem. I'm so comfortable, so happy shooting from the hip about something, but if it's about something else, it's like, don't put the spotlight on me. That's not what I want. I'm the opposite.
You like
Not
to be
singing.
prepared. You like to be prepared, know your stuff, and then you're ready
Yes,
to go. Yeah, yeah.
exactly.
You kind of
Exactly.
touched on it a little bit before with your family, and I'm also interested in some of the mentors that have had a influence in your life. So, who would you say is the most influential mentor that has helped you along the way?
I think my very first mentor that I recognized was when I started at Sprint at Global One, when got that first job selling. My boss and he was initially the country manager for Telstra once upon a time. So he ended up being my boss in Melbourne. He used to spend after work time with me where he used to whiteboard. If I had questions, he'd whiteboard situational things with me from a bureaucratic corporate perspective on how to address things with hierarchy, any topics of bureaucracy or proving your case if you're a salesperson to your higher ups in the world without creating controversy, and challenging me because, believe it or not, I was a little bit of a spitfire in my early 20s, so I used to shoot from the hip a little bit too often than not. I've calmed down a lot. So I had to tame that. And I knew that was a shortcoming of mine because, when you want to succeed, sometimes, if you're a little bit too tenacious, you spit the wrong things out of your mouth and gets you into trouble. But he used to guide me in my thought process. Like if I had a big conversation coming up with my CEO about whether an account was headquartered in Sydney or Melbourne, because it was a new company at that time, I had to present a case to him, even if I sold the contract in order to get paid. So how do I do that without blowing a stat because when you're 24 years old, you are emotionally attached to every red cent that you make because you're
Mm.
hard earning, you're slogging it, you're ready to cry when somebody takes something away from you that you've earned and really dug in your teeth to. It's emotional. So,
Yep.
learning how to separate that really took a mentor like my boss, Kevin, to sit with me a lot. I mean, he would spend at least 3 or 4 times a week for an hour or two after work, and we whiteboard these situations because I'd ask him, and I learnt to ask him a lot more because I said, how am I going to deal with this? Because I feel like I'm standing like a stalk. I've got one leg on the ground. I don't know where the other leg is, and I need two on the ground to handle these corporate guys because I'm green. I'm as green as they come, and I'm either going to get my head chopped off or you know, it's not going to go the way I know it's going to go because I knew what my personality was like. So he really coached me. And I think it takes a strong coach who's had a lot of experience to sit with you and be available to you to talk you through things. And it was really me asking. He's my boss, but I also trusted him and he was an advocate. But the fact that I asked him the tough
Mm.
questions and
Yep.
asked him for help, and this is the
Yep.
thing I say, you never be afraid to ask for help if you really need it. Because you have people that will work with you in your company. You don't, if you feel like the boat's rocking not in your direction, there are a lot of people you can talk to and
Yeah.
who will talk you, who are older and mature and wise in their professions who can talk you through things just to give you advice. They're open to it,
Yep.
but you have to be willing to ask for that. And that's literally how I found my first mentor.
It's good advice. Just to ask if you need help. You see, we often think we have to do things alone or we've got to get it right by ourselves or whatnot. But as you're suggesting, there's people out there that want to help. They just need to be asked. They're not going to help if they're not asked because they probably don't know that there's a need there. But if you approach the person and ask, you can get the help that you need.
The interesting thing, I was so young, I had no really depth or understanding or awareness of how well respected and how well known my boss was in the telecom industry. That I went into this corporation once and they literally asked me, they said, "Are you Kevin's protege?" And I just looked at him like I took a back seat and said, "What am I what?" They said, "Are you Kevin's latest protege?" And I'm like, I didn't know he had proteges. They're like, "Yeah, the last one's now like some bigwig manager at Telstra." I'm like, huh, did not know that. But he's really good at it. He's really good at it. So and he's still a dear friend to me today. So he's
Oh,
retired,
wonderful.
but yeah, still
Wonderful.
a dear friend.
And are you mentoring anyone at the moment?
I am mentoring a couple of. It's interesting how people walk into your life. Some of my older kids, I am, believe it or not. There are a few people in business that I've been mentoring along the way who have asked me when they've changed jobs and so forth. So it's not a regular thing. It's almost like every quarter, once a quarter, once every 6 months, they might reach out to me and ask me
Yeah.
something and so forth. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's hard to say because you can't really look for a mentor, but it's just about asking and not being afraid to ask questions. I think because that's the only reason being so tenacious the way I was. If I didn't ask questions and get answers, that's the way I found people who would just
Yeah.
stuck to me and walk me through things.
And so, from what I'm hearing, is you'll mentor or coach or provide advice if asked, just like you
Hmm.
did when you were looking for that. So it's not really about the mentor trying to look for people to mentor. It's about if someone has the initiative to ask me for my help, I'm very, very happy to give it. So that's a really important lesson for people listening out there. If you do want coaching or advice, ask for it. And
Yep.
most likely you'll get it. As you say, you do it in a respectful way and try and make it easy as you can for the person that you're asking. Human beings usually like to help if they can.
And the interesting thing that I found too is when I first started my own business here at HD Dynamics, when I first started this, it's like, oh yeah, I've worked for corporations forever. This should be a piece of cake. Gets to a point where it's like, oh. No, I've really got to execute on a marketing strategy. I've got to execute on my business plan. It's great talking about it and put it on paper, but executing is a different story. I said, well, you know, I've got all this general knowledge, but I don't have specifics, and I'm not a marketing guru. I'm not going to pay somebody $1 million to do this. I'm just starting up. So I ended up looking up at the local library, believe it or not, for resources that I could tap into that were free for businesses, for startups. And I found a group of retired people who specialize in all different industries, whether it's technology or philanthropic stuff or whatever you're doing, healthcare, who are on retirement age or have retired and just offer this as almost like a mentorship.
Yeah.
And they would come and arrange a meeting and meet with you at the library in one of their rooms and help you build a marketing strategy. Or they'd challenge you in your thought process about what you want to do and what kind of business you want to run. And all these resources are for free. And I was like, wow, I said, why do most people not know about what you guys offer? And it's not like a group of guys who know each other, it's just this forum of people that have put themselves out there and said, hey, I'm free to offer advice if people want to ask. And that's how I established a lot of what I did to have my business running for 8 years. Could have easily collapsed in COVID or before that, hiring employees, not hiring employees, all those decisions that you make when you run a business, all those challenges that you go through. But you have the help. You just have to ask for it. And it doesn't cost anything. And that was the most absurdly surprising thing that I found out there. It's like people think you have to spend so much money to invest in your business to start it up and figure it out. You don't. You just have to ask the right people, and they're on your doorstep. They're in your local library forums. They're retired people who have been 40 years in technology or whatever who just want to share their advice and occupy their time. And they're a wealth of wisdom.
What a great life lesson that you're giving us here and the listeners. Now, we've gone from you working for all those organizations. Now we're talking about when you're running your own business. Now, as we mentioned in the intro, way back then, you ended up buying the company that you once hired you. So you got to tell us that story.
Yes, I got into the CRM business back in around 2007. And it was just kind of happenstance because this is when telecom, all the CEOs ended up in jail, right? The MCI, WorldComs, all the rest of it. I mean, it was just la la land in telecom. And it's like, time to jump ship. I've been doing this for 14 years. Time for me to ex-nay. So I actually took a hiatus because I was overwhelmed. It's like I've never stopped working in my entire life since I was 17. I said, I got to take a break. So I dumbed down my resume for about 18 months. I really had no idea what my second career path would be.
Yeah.
And I dumbed down my resume to become a secretary to myself. So I ended up getting a receptionist job. What an eye opener that was. And I loved it because you see people from a totally different perspective. You really do. Doing that for about, I think it was like 5 months. They kept trying to promote me. I'm like, no, I do not want a promotion. I just want to be a receptionist. Thank you, and hand out candy to people who visit, a cup of coffee. I'm good. I don't want to think. Along the way, I was putting I got a call from this Microsoft partner and said, we saw your resume, we'd like you to come in. So ended up working for a Microsoft partner firm here in Orange County for a solid 18 months, and then moved to another one, got poached by another partner who wanted me to work for them. And I learned all about CRM. I learned about all about business applications for accounting, for all the whole Microsoft suite. And I worked for them for about 10 years. And so these guys, the guys who own the company, started their own application for the restaurant industry. And they just came up to me, and I'm like, could see the writing on the wall because they were trying to take some of my consultants away from me who were implementing my solutions and so forth. And I said, well, what are you doing with the company? because you're downsizing and you're not really talking to me about it because I'm running this right now. And I said, why don't you just sell me the practice? I said, I'll take it. I said, they've been my clients for 10 years. Sell me the database. I'll pay you based on revenue for a year. And literally, it was that. Within 3 weeks, I just changed the name and took all my clients in the database and off to the races, and just had to start
Fantastic.
everything from scratch. So that's about as weird and as simple as it was for me. It was a bit scary because, you can sell it, but to run the practice was completely different than what I thought, because now I'm dealing with people and consultants and livelihoods and all that sort of stuff. So,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So you just jumped in, you saw an opportunity, you jumped in, sounds totally Jody, and thought, I'll work it out as I go along. I'm going to back myself. I've got the right mindset, attitude, and I know how to ask for help. So I'm going to do this. And you've turned it into a wonderful success. And so I'm really interested in that mindset shift between working for someone and then now you are the business owner. And you touched on it a little bit earlier, but how now it's all up to you. Talk about, performance based.
Yes, it is. It is very interesting when you go through your career working for people in corporations and then working for yourself. And to me, it's been a very humbling experience because I don't forget my career. I've had my highs and lows. I've had my bureaucratic fights, as you call them, learning how to wing my way through companies and success and all that sort of stuff. And even the downside of it, there's always ugly sides to corporations and so forth, and the risk of losing your job one day and having it another, and all that sort of
Yep.
instability that comes with it. And the same thing happens when you run your own business. You're not quite 100% sure of how you're going to do everything and you're going to do it everything right, because you still rely on a lot of people to do the work for you. Like,
Yep.
I do not do implementations. I sell things, I sell all my clients, I do all the contracts for my clients, but I have a team of people who do all the implementations. So now I have to rely on them to do their jobs
Mm,
properly.
yep.
So managing them is always understanding what I want as a client for my client. So, how do I want my client to feel after I've done something for them? And I keep that at top of mind. Like, are they being reasonable? Are they not being reasonable? Obviously, there's always going to be difficult people to deal with, challenging people, nice people. But
Mm.
the beauty of owning your own company, you do have the liberty of keeping your clientele as close to your own personality as possible. So that's the gift. You can choose your parent. You can choose your customers.
Just to jump in there, I like how you said, I start off by saying, how do I want my customers or my clients to feel? So I love that. Also learning about starting with the end in mind. What is the outcome that you want to achieve? And then taking some action in terms of that. So I love that that's your intention in the beginning.
Yes. Because if I was on the other side of the fence, I know how I want to be treated. And you want somebody to, number one, these people have a job. They work for a company. So they've got to look good in their jobs. They've got to make good decisions. So I've got to help them make the right decisions so that they look good for their bosses and so forth, because everything goes up the chain. And if things don't go wrong, then I have to be accountable. I have to accept the consequences. I have to accept the liability and conversations that go with that. So you have to be tough in that respect, but always keep it on a business level. Never make it personal. And you always get those some people that do make it personal. And it's like, well, you try to convince them and you do the best you can. But at the end of the day, the clients who stay with you work through things with you. And they will take side conversations with you to work through things with you when they understand and you're being very sincere to them. So it's all about your intentions. If your intentions are expressed to your clients throughout the process, like you're not just selling widgets, you're not just there to do this to make that, you've got an intention of what you want to accomplish with your client. So I try to keep it as a big word, but I try to keep it as strategic as possible. So I'm aligning with their goals, what they want to accomplish. I don't just find out what does your business need and why are you coming to me, and yes, I can do it. The answer is yes, I can do it. And so can a million other companies. But why do you want me long term? Because I'm not here for a short term. reason. I'm here for the right reason, for a long term reason. So you can count on me. You can pick up the phone on the weekend and call me if something goes wrong. I want to be that reliable, consistent person that you can call.
Yeah.
And that's my
Yeah.
differentiator. And with Microsoft, believe it or not, we had a lot of success in the early days when we started this. Was they used to give us a lot of clients that were having bad implementations and say, "Can you fix this? Can you help this customer?" Because they've had a bad experience. So that was a huge learning curve to get people out of a mindset where they're already in a negative space and trying to
Mm.
do change management and then restructure how you position them to feel favorable about the mistakes that have been made and has cost
Yeah.
them a lot of money. It's a
Yeah.
difficult position, but it has taught us a lot about patience and not saying we have to achieve this by X. Let's do this slowly. And that's the gift that I have being an owner to say, I want to take this slowly. I do not want to do this all at once and make huge mistakes. And people have been more respondent. I've had clients for over 8 years now, over 10 years, even from our last business that we had. So it's been a very steady experience. It's not been like enormously. I didn't want to be like an Apple, you know, hey, I'm going to be a billionaire in 2 weeks kind of a company. I want to enjoy what I do. If I'm going to
Yeah.
do it for a long time, I want to enjoy it. I don't have to be doing these multi-million dollar contracts and stressing myself out. I want to enjoy what I do. I want to enjoy the clients that I have. So I tend to be a little selective about who I want to do business with.
I can see how all the learnings that you've had and the mindset that you have about that, and that I want to enjoy what I do and I'm for the client and I really want to help them, that all shines through. We've had a wonderful journey with you today from Australia to your early working life and how your tenacity and your ambition and asking questions, how that got you to work in the United States very successfully, and then thriving in your own business. Now, if you could look back, it's a bit of a cliche question, but I love asking it. If you could look back now and see Jodi Herman maybe just finishing high school or something, what's there something that you'd like to say to her if you could have a conversation for greatness with her right now?
I would say to her, that's a very interesting question. I would say stop admiring too much. Stop looking at things that you strive to be. Recognize who you are for yourself. I think that's what she was lacking. She lacked the confidence, she lacked the strength that she already had. She didn't know she had it for quite a while. And I think if she had the confidence and the strength to say this is mine rather than, I think a lot of teenagers, we have this adoration. I even remember having that with the sprint folks overseas. There's this adoration that you have because you want to aspire. You've got this image or this reflection of people reflecting mirrors on you saying this is what success is and this is what it looks like. It may not be the same thing for all people, but it's got to
Mm.
be about yourself first. And you've got to realize what those qualities are. I think it's a reflection of how you are raised with your parents and what you're fed. In my world of growing up in corporate business, it was still very chauvinistic. I hate to say it, back in the 80s and the 90s. It was still a very much a man's world. And so that was a very much a tough struggle. It made me a lot more vocal than I needed to be. But at the same time, you can be silent and powerful. You don't have to be vocal and have too much vocabulary, so to speak. But you have to try to understand if somebody gave me like a lesson or a journey of self awareness, and I'm not just talking self awareness because we get all the blah words, the big magic words that people always say that self awareness is your self identity. Well, what is that? Because everybody's unique. Like, to me, I was an observer, but how did I use that observation for myself? Because I remember even being with my friends, I always like was the quiet one, took a back seat, where I could have said a lot more. I could have known my strength and practiced it a lot more and understood that a lot more about myself as an individual. And I think if I had that kind of mentorship or that kind of awareness for myself, because I think I tried to as a teenager, you try a lot of different things and some things don't work and some things do to try and figure yourself out. But I don't think you need to go through that many bumps to know that, hey, you got this. And it's, like I can say to my kids now, hey, the difference between being lazy and you've got what it takes because they have the self confidence. You know what I mean? You can see it. You're aware when you get older, but if I go to look back on my younger self, if somebody
Mm.
said that to me, it would have had a different echo in my life, a different
Yeah,
light in
right.
my life.
Yep, yep. And we ask that because I think it's of interest to the listeners as well as yourself to get that piece of advice, to hear it again today.
Yeah, I think it's a self-esteem, confidence.
Yep.
It's, but I think it's unique. There's levels of what kids have and what they have to offer, and there's so many different talents and whatever personality traits they do have. It's just knowing when you're. If I could talk back to my older self, I would have said, you've been a follower too much because this is what is being expected of you, or you've done this too much because this is what the measuring stick said, instead of understanding what my personality traits were and how I could have really taken advantage of that.
Yeah,
Because
right.
there was a stopping point. It's like, even when I played baseball, this is a great example because being an only girl playing baseball in my life growing up, this is a whole lot of challenges. Trust me, there are many coaches who did not want me on the field. There are guys that didn't want to play against me. I'm a girl, blah, blah, blah. But the one thing that I had was my self confidence and my talent, right? That kept me going. And I played in representative teams for the state and played with a bunch of different guys that have a lot of respect for me today and have known for years. But the one thing that I didn't have was the confidence to know that it's not just my talent, it was my personality. And I feel like that didn't shine. But I was also told, okay, by the time you get to 20, you shouldn't be doing this anymore. You should stick to softball. You should stick to this. This was the cliche that we got fed. And having no power for myself, I couldn't do what I really wanted to do, if that makes sense.
What did you really want to do?
I wanted to play. I wanted to play with guys my whole life. It's just, and I wanted to make it to the major leagues. Like my brother was almost there. He went to college in the US and got a scholarship playing baseball. And I was like, I want to
Mm.
be right there. I want to do that. That was my
Right.
dream.
Yep.
And it was totally expunged from my mind when I was about 18, 19 years old. That this is as far as you go.
Yep.
And it's just like, it's a talk about a letdown of the tires. Because, I was so young when I finished high school. It's like, oh, you're going to be a secretary when you grow up.
Yep.
Those sort of things. You get fed a lot of things from all different facets of life. But to me,
Yeah.
I just wanted to prove everybody wrong at the end of the day.
Well, and I think in the baseball context, yeah, what you're talking about and how those things and opinions might have stopped you. But from what you've explained to us today, there's been plenty of other examples where you have not let that stop you and your ambition and your tenacity has just hit the forefront and you've gone after what you've wanted and you've got it. So even though it might not have worked out for that, from what I can hear, it certainly worked out in lots of areas of your life, especially in your professional business life.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah,
That was the one thing that I knew that I owned that I could do. And I was like, I'm just doing it. I wasn't asking permission anymore. I'm just going to do it.
good, good, good.
Yeah.
To finish off, we've got the Merco Motivation Spotify playlist where I ask all the guests, what's a particular song that you play to pump yourself up or to get really motivated and get some shit happening? What would it be for you?
Oh, 1 in a Million by the Tubes.
All right. Well, listeners, One in a Million by the Tubes is going on the Merco Motivation playlist.
That or Jump by Van Halen.
Yeah, I've got the original album with that on it. listen to that motivational playlist all the time because it reminds me of the guests and motivational as well. And I love that kind of stuff.
Yeah, one in a million. I don't know. For some reason, there was a month period where it was on every day when I used to drive to work, and I used to crank that thing up and get in my car, and I'd be like, "Woo!" By the time I got to work, it's like so good.
Well, Jodi, my daughter's in grade 6 at the moment. Imagine when we were in grade 6 thinking, yeah, in, let's not say the years, in many years' time, we will be talking across the world using technology that wasn't even, it was just science fiction back then. And we'll be having a conversation for greatness about how wonderful our lives have turned out. We wouldn't have thought this would be happening at all, would we?
John, it's just to me, I've got a family that lives all around the world. All my nieces and nephews live in Japan and Australia and just Canada and US and South Africa and everywhere. And I tell you what, if it wasn't for technology, life would be a lot more difficult. And I'm so grateful that it was created before my parents, God bless them, were, departed this world, that we could have these phone conversations and video conversations whenever we wanted. It was just amazing. I was just
Mm.
truly blessed that they actually, we could have that experience. It was really good.
I want to thank you for being on the show. Jodi, fuck, I'll say your name right. Jodi Herman.
The Herminator.
Thanks. Thank you so much for being on the show. What a great conversation. Stay awesome.
Love you, mate. Thank you. Pleasure being on. Thanks, John.